Welcome back to the Legal Alternative Podcast with me, Sam Pawson. Joined us over by Nils. Nils, morning everybody. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, more importantly?
I think we'll share it later and talk
Yeah.
about the office, but I mean, I'm slightly broken, so I'm glad I'm sat down for this now. We'll share the reasons later. But Nils, do you want to check the listeners what we're talking about today?
Yeah, some really big changes. We were just speaking there off air. We're both into politics, so I'm going to make this non-political though.
Yeah.
And as I say, I normally keep a keen eye on politics, so I'm into things like The Rest is Politics and Laura Kuenssberg on a Sunday morning. But I kept an even keener eye this Sunday than most, because the official announcement was actually yesterday. Some huge changes coming to the immigration system that we have in this country, and the Labour government is hoping this year alone to reduce the number of successful applications by 50,000. So a white paper has been introduced. I have got on my phone 2 pages worth of changes, which I won't discuss each one of them in some depth, but we'll try to cover most of them. So there is going to be some very significant changes, which are designed to prioritise domestic workforce development and economic growth. So starting with what I believe is the key changes, which is going to be to the skilled worker visa migration. They're going to raise the skill level so that the skilled worker visa will rise to what's called RQF level 6. So it will be a job that is at a bachelor's degree level, which is a very big change. There's going to be the abolition of the immigration salary list, which is the list that allowed salary discounts for certain roles, and what they call domestic recruitment emphasis. So employers must demonstrate efforts to recruit and train domestic workers before hiring from abroad. Biggest change, in my opinion, is going to be the social care sector changes. So closure of care worker visa route. So the international recruitment route for care workers is planned to be phased out by 2028. In that transition period, though, existing care workers in the UK can extend their visas during this period. So a little bit of hope there for the care sector. Settlement and citizenship, some changes there. Extended residency requirement. So the qualifying period for settlement will now go from 5 to 10 years. And what the Labour government are calling a contribution-based model. So applications will consider factors like tax compliance, employment in high-skilled sectors, and community involvement. I'm not quite sure how that last part will be defined. English language requirement, that is going to be what's higher standard across all routes. So that'll be raised for all visa routes, the English language requirement, and in particular, dependents. So for the first time, adults will have to demonstrate a basic English proficiency at A1 level and progressing to B2 level for settlement. And then some other further changes. Graduate route and international students, so reduced post-study work period and stricter compliance for institutions. So educational institutions are going to have to meet higher standards to sponsor international students, which is quite interesting. And just for good measure, visa fees and charges, increased immigration skills charge, that'll rise by 32%. And a potential levy on universities, a proposed 6% levy on higher education institutions. So lots and lots of changes coming, all I think unashamedly designed to make things harder. I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong, but significant impact for employers, particularly in the social care sector, for educational institutions as well. So I think message to our clients is you need to start planning now for these big changes, particularly if you're dependent on an international workforce, as some of our clients are.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think we can't avoid the politics in this. It's obviously clearly designed, and I think the government would admit that. As you say, social care sector close to my heart. I think it's going to cause some real challenges. That workforce planning point, I think Nils is absolutely right. So some of this 28, did we say, in terms of on social care, the bit of transition period. So, which will quickly come round. So lots to do and lots to put on an already stressed system in terms of the NI changes that have been coming in terms of affordability of employees. So yeah, lots of challenges, but ones we're here to support clients with.
Absolutely. And I think there's 2 things that's interesting for me. One is these make the way through to practice.
Yeah.
Will we go back to the old system of a resident labour market test, which doesn't quite go as far as these proposed changes?
Yeah.
Because I think we've already started to see kickback from certain sectors like the care sector. Will the government listen to those? And how is this going to be policed? So particularly for things like a contribution-based model for settlement. is the government planning on less applications going forward, which frees up space for UKVI to police things better? Or won't they have the effect and it just already overstretches an already overstretched agency? That's the difficulty. So it'd be interesting to see, do they make the way through? And then what happens as to how this is going to be policed going forward?
It's interesting because you think that there'd be some, yeah, there's some clear changes that will have a big impact on industry, and as you say, getting a bachelor degree level qualifications is very difficult. You would think some easier political wins with less economic impact would be, such as the language test, that you think wouldn't have such an impact on business, and whether they will become the priority, you would think would give more of a political win with less of the economic challenges. But we will, I say, we'll soon see, I suppose.
Yes, we will. We will. So we'll keep everybody up to date on those changes.
Perfect. In my inbox this week, kind of building off the podcast last week, and by the time of this coming out, we will have just had our event on diversity, equality, and inclusion with the leader I know's speaking alongside Jamie Jones Buchanan, which will be fantastic, and our managing partner Neil Wilson. So what I was going to do was give a bit of a sneak peek, really, or a bit of a flavour for those who can't come to that event, of what I'm going to be talking about, which is some of the more, and it's really relevant in terms of what things in my inbox, areas of the Equality Act and discrimination law that aren't often the press focus. So I think most listeners will be familiar with the kind of 9 protected characteristics, but what dominates my inbox generally and dominates my working practice is generally race, sex, essentially sexual orientation issues. Are the 3 protected characteristics you often see more claims, with perhaps age. What I thought I'd focus on, what I'm going to talk about on Thursday, is some of the kind of lesser known ones, and some areas where I mean quite headline grabbing of things that you potentially wouldn't think are a protected characteristic and are, and indeed the converse of that, where things have been held not to be a protected characteristic where some people think they should be. So just to go through a few of them for the listeners. So various employment tribunal rulings throughout the past few years have clarified a few things. One is a question of when we talk about someone's ethnic identity or race, ethnicity, nationality in terms of protected characteristic. And we get issues, and I'll talk about one that's not later, but can often be the same, is individuals from either a gypsy or Roma or travellers background, where we do get issues in the workplace, and that is quite routinely held by the tribunal to be a protected characteristic. The converse of that, and there's been cases on this recently, are regional identities within the UK, for example, such as there was a claim involving someone from Liverpool, and being a Scouser or being from Liverpool in itself isn't a protected characteristic. So can be a key distinguishing factor between someone's kind of ethnic shared identity, which a lot of Roma travellers and Roma gypsies would have, that isn't held by people from a city, potentially. That again can be quite for I think most people quite a hard distinction, because lots of people will have city pride. I'm going to talk about the marathon and community pride, but that in the eyes of the law isn't a protected characteristic, while as being, as I say, from a travelling background would be. So we need to be careful there. That's often an interesting area of protected characteristic. Often the religions or beliefs in the protected characteristics is one that causes lots of issue. And again, 2 converse ones that I think this did get some press a few years ago, where ethical veganism was held to potentially could be a protected characteristic under religion or belief. But then the converse of that is someone who had views about Brexit. I think I mentioned in the pod in previous. So someone had views about Brexit, immigration, and halal meat wasn't viewed as a strong enough belief to amount to a protected characteristic. So again, we've got there 2 really competing judgments on what amounts to a belief. And the advice for clients on that is, again, is the detail matters and how the individual held those beliefs. So it isn't always about being necessarily an absolute organized religion, although that obviously clearly is easier to demonstrate a religion or belief. So the ethical veganism, for example, the individual clearly had to demonstrate how that belief was held and how strongly that view was held and how that impacted on their lives, more than someone who had very strong but potentially inconsistent views about kind of Brexit immigration wouldn't meet that same test. So really kind of interesting area of the Equality Act to get into for our clients and listeners to the pod. It's all about not rushing to judgment. So where people may express sometimes quite strong and even offensive beliefs, we do need to pause and say, well, actually, whether we agree with them or not, could they amount to a protected characteristic? And then take that considered approach, because even sometimes when they do amount to a protected characteristic, if they are so abhorrent and we have policies that will be against those, there are still action that you can take. But really important whenever we're doing that kind of someone's belief that we do really pause for thought.
Yeah.
Don't know, Nils, any views on that?
Presumably it's all about looking behind what the purpose of a characteristic being protected is.
I think so.
And that is the protection of certain groups of society that are vulnerable to discrimination, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's why I would imagine someone from Liverpool is never going to succeed in arguing that that is a protected characteristic, because that is not a subsection or mainstream section even of society that is deemed to need any sort of protection.
I think so. We've got a really good question from socials on what I could call positive action, which also links to that. So no, really good point. And as always for listeners, any advice on that, I think it is critical, and contact us. I'm happy to help.
Yep.
Out the office.
I think you've got some news about what you're up to.
News. Why I'm sitting so kind of rigidly today is because we did do the Leeds Marathon on Sunday, so probably a week ago at the time that this is released. So yeah, rather stiff still the Tuesday after the Sunday, but no, absolutely fantastic day. Hot again, third year I've done it. It's every year been kind of miserable in the training, and then up to 24 degrees. So no, yeah, just about slogged up Otley Road, but no, fantastic day. As I said, community was just brilliant. The crowds through Headingley at the end, and the crowds in Otley in particular were great. So something always love do. Always, however much training I do, I'm miserable at some points of the run. But no, we were talking. We might have kind of provoked some interest in you. I know you've done them in the past, so you're thinking about it maybe for next year.
I'd like to do it. We'll see. We'll see. We were at our mock trial last week, and they were setting the event up for I assume the finish was on the pitch.
Yeah.
And I must admit, I was a bit jealous that I wasn't doing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll have to wait and see, but you should be very proud. Great achievement.
No, that finish, I did basically crawl over that finish at the end of the carpet and the red carpet, which is very important. But no, all good. So yeah, exciting times. Should mention that the obviously mock trial, fantastic day. 5 attendees I think we had, which was brilliant. Great feedback we received. So look out, more events coming on both the employment and the regulatory side.
Yep, and as you said earlier, a great event coming up this week.
Yeah.
So yeah, continue to hopefully excel in that area. But really, really great event. I really enjoyed it last week.
It was. Finally, and questions from some socials, Nils. Again, an employment one, and it's linked to. I thought it was a really good one I selected because it was linked to my topic. But I think we can both have a view on this. The question from socials was, can we ask our recruitment team to put forward a diverse shortlists of candidates for a position? So when we are recruiting for a job, can we go out and say to either an agency or an internal recruitment team and say, I want a diverse list? So that could be diversity in many respects for any of the protected characteristics. So can that be done is the question. Obviously linked to what we've talked about, we need to be making sure that we don't discriminate against obviously any protected characteristics. So the real question is about kind of this idea of positive action, and the technicality lies in the Equality Act, which it's actually in section 159 of the Equality Act, which does allow positive action. Recruitment is actually defined as one of the areas you are allowed to do positive action. Section 159(5) of the Equality Act. So just to kind of clarify, and we'll then talk about practice, Nils, and what we both look at in practice. But I'll read section 159, which permits an employer to take positive action where it reasonably thinks either persons who share a protected characteristic suffer a disadvantage connecting to the characteristic, or participation in an activity by persons who share a protected characteristic is disproportionately low.
Right.
So I think what we're looking at, that key second point, disproportionately low. So often examples I give are if you're looking at women, for example, in a lot of kind of science-based roles, they're so they have a protected characteristic, but that participation in that area is proportionately low. Those are circumstances that, as long as we are taking again proportionate action, I think you could then, in that respect, ask your recruiters to give a diverse shortlist. I think we need to be careful when we just use a blanket term of diverse.
Yeah.
You need to be very specific to say, well, we are recruiting in a role like, engineering, science-based roles for if we're using the sex as protected characteristic, where involvement in that industry is proportionally low, that we then can take some positive action. I don't know any views.
I'm just wondering, how do you prove that the proportion is low in respect to the?
Yeah, I think obviously there are industry figures. Again, if you are using recruitment consultants, use those benchmarking tools and that can say that. There is some obviously internal evidence you can point to about your own workforce.
Yeah.
But you do need to be careful, because your workforce might not be reflective of the industry, and that might not be disproportionately low as an industry. So I think you're absolutely right. So again, as listeners probably will expect, the word from the lawyers is proceed with caution, but there is opportunity to do that, but be really clear with the instructions, and you say, Nils, back it up with evidence.
Yeah, so it's not just go to the recruiter and say, give me a diverse list of candidates. These are the candidates that struggle to break through in our industry. That's the instructions to the recruiter.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I think that brings us to an end. So big thank you from me, and we'll be back next week.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.